BFM 89.9. Good morning, I'm Nadia Hassan, sitting in for Sharat Kutan today for your morning headlines. Of course, what's dominating the papers today, thank God we've moved beyond the weather of the past couple of times, is basically the upcoming by-election. As unsurprisingly, for some papers, they choose to frame it in certain ways. The biggest one is basically highlighting PKR's infighting. So if you go to the NST, it goes that Khalid and Anwar on a collision course. Now, this is actually kind of not a surprise given that once the by-election was called and the whole Kajang issue came up, and then sort of Khalid went and did a checkmate by getting the water deal through, that this would inevitably come to a head. So a week after the water restructuring deal, Datuk Sri Anwar Ibrahim has now thrown a spanner in the works according to this story. He said that Selangor Menteri Besar Tan Sri Abdul Khalid cannot sign any agreement with the federal government without the consent of the Pakatan leadership. So this is one of those fights that's going to get a little bit messy, but definitely you can hear all the bulls butting their heads, and it goes beyond just posturing. Definitely it's needed. You need this water deal to come through, and the fact that they pushed it in. Utusan Malaysia does exactly the same thing, where it says Khalid and Anwar berbala. That's our word of the day, which is namely berbala. So it's the same kind of principle, talking about them being on a collision course. A lot's going to happen as you lead up to like the Kajang by-election, so it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. But ultimately, you need to get the water deal through. It has to go beyond just posturing and political kind of maneuvering. But a lot of people kind of understood that this is how it's going to be, and this is what's going to happen in the coming months. And you have to kind of see that this has to have some resolution in sight by the election comes along. Definitely that's going to be the case. But ultimately, all of us are still suffering from water rationing. Some people have some 2 days off, 2 days on, and you can't believe the number of people who have complained that when they were scheduled to have not have water, they had water, and when they're supposed to have water, they didn't. So all of this needs to come to a head. Whether Langat 2 is going to be the issue, but regardless, Anwar has put those span in the works, saying it's not going to do. But are we going to have another stalemate for another 5 years? That still remains to be seen. Moving on to the Star, it has a rather punny headline in the sense that I think the sub-editor had a little bit of fun today, where it says like, ouch, it hurts stocks. So basically what's going to happen is the Health Ministry says a 14.4% increase in private medical, but it's going to be a hard pill to swallow. Now, if you ever know me, I always believe that healthcare and education should always be free because it's necessary to run an economy. But this kind of increase is going to make it harder for those, especially in times when prices are already going up. So now, are they trying to tell this subvert kind of message that you're supposed to keep healthy, or either that or self-medicate? I don't know which one is kind of worse, but you know, it's very hard to say what this is going to be. Does this mean that people are just not going to get access to healthcare? That's going to be another thing entirely. And the Sun actually also prints this up, saying that doctors' fees are definitely up. Private practitioners to charge 14.4% more from today. And then they actually also mentioned that doctors are free to charge any amount they wish as long as it does not exceed the ceiling rate. The fact that it has a ceiling rate is a good thing, but the fact that they can charge whatever it wants, and we still need to know why the kind of hike in prices, so that's going to be due. It's just another thing to add to the fact that in light of GST coming, higher petrol prices, higher electricity prices, now it's more expensive to get sick. Going back to the Utusan for a minute, there's this other little picture where you see this massive number of people actually praying in front, Solat Hajat Bertahan Kalimah Allah, and it's back to the Utusan where it talks about how Herald has a right to sort of talk about the decision to that forbids the use of Allah other than for Muslims. You know, they've actually staged a protest, and it depends on which paper you kind of get. This one talks about them defending their rights. The Star just talks about them trying to angrily push their way in place. So it depends on the view that you get on this matter. If you go to Sinar Harian, they actually place up the side supporting the exclusive right of the royal of, as you can see, Mahkamah Tanggung Putusan, you can see it right here. And speaking of Sina, let's not forget that they also have thrown their hat in for the Kajang issue, saying that Khalid shouldn't be rushed into stuff. So is this a slap on the wrist, or is this Khalid just sort of like exuding his powers before the Kajang election and getting all these things into place? Ultimately, the people who will suffer are us. We're the ones with still not enough water. So we don't really want another stalemate, but you can understand why the posturing kind of goes on, and it's just going to continue on until the next couple of weeks. Moving on to the Malay Mail for today, they are talking a lot about the environment, and we have been talking about the bad weather. At least the haze has cleared up, so not many people are choking or having like bad headaches. But it just has this little thing of talking about toxic life for 20 years. So there's fires at illegal dump site that choked residents. Assemblyman says open burning a health hazard once API meter at school. Lack of water, manpower, frustrates fire department. It's the worst case scenario all around, isn't it? Not only are there people openly burning fires, especially when it's hazy. By the note, if I ever see that guy who was burning the fires openly on the side of the Sprint Highway when it was the haziest, I hope you choke on it. You know, and talking about the lack of water, and how are you going to put the fire out if you don't have any water? So ultimately, you need, you know, that's another issue that a lot of people have to talk about. And he also talks about the Langat 2 thing at stake. It's just too many question marks at this point, and you know, it all revolves back to the same kind of issue. The other also interesting story to note from Berita Harian today, although the fact that there's another cute little headline about 8 ditahan tipu pelajar SPM. You know, they just took like personal information. Hey, they're actually now going into schools. How wonderful is that? Why aren't the people stopping them? They say about 2040 is declared the year of battle against illegal cigarettes. Now, if you don't know, Malaysia has one of the highest incidences of illegal smuggling in the world when it comes to cigarettes. The big tobacco guys have already beaten their chest a lot about this to the government, and yet the problem doesn't seem to kind of go. Ultimately, it's down to sort of reinforcement, and if you want to make 2014 the year, you better sort of walk the talk. I'd like to see that if a year on from now, whether or not they'd still be sort of beating this drum. 35%. Imagine, 35% of all cigarettes in Malaysia are actually illegal. Now, that is a staggering number to kind of think about. And also, from the government's point of view, it's lost revenue and it's money that they sorely need at this point of time. And finally, for a couple of things, Metro also does mention about the Gempur Penyudup's rokok, which is probably one of those things. But it also has this ridiculous, you know, you gotta love Harian Metro for the sensationalist headlines. And not only do they have starlets explaining away their personal lives, sadly, they also have this woman shot in the head at a plantation. It's become basically some of the Chinese papers already, where they sort of like showed very blurred pictures. Seriously, not right, not what you want to do for your morning coffee. But on a lighter, happier, sort of like cheerful note, I do like the front page of The Sun, where it talks about this oldest woman in the world, Misao Okawa, who eats her birthday cake at 11 and 16 at a nursing home in Osaka yesterday. And she still looks actually fairly healthy and fairly very cheerful. So we'd always like to know what those things are, but congratulations to her, and that's a nice way to end our morning headlines for today. So be happy, healthy and wise on this Thursday. I'm Nadia Hassan for Morning Headlines on BFM 89.9.